as we have seen the past several days, no doubt, the Democrat slash legacy media, and I put it that way intentionally, that media machine has been pulling out all the stops to somehow try to portray Governor and Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz as some sort of moderate Midwestern Democrat. But quite frankly, anyone who is even remotely honest, anyone who has a clue of what's going on in the world, knows that he is anything but that. And we want to dive deeper into that and the facade that the media is trying to create of Tim Walz. And joining me now is author Sam Faddis. He is a retired CIA operations officer. He served in the Near East and South Asia. He's also host of Ground Truth. Sam, welcome to Washington Watch. It is indeed an honor to have you.
It is a pleasure to be here, sir. Thank you.
Well, thanks to you. I want to go back and stress what I said about you. You formerly were with the CIA, operations officer for many years. You literally, I think it's safe to say, ran spies in other countries. And so you know a lot more than any of us on all of this. When it comes to Governor Walz, over the decades of a very cozy relationship with China, from a spycraft type terminology, what are you concerned about?
Well, look, I think you are looking at an individual that is completely compromised by the communist Chinese. And, you know, we used to talk about this in terms of the business of recruiting sources and running sources, which was this my central duty at the Central Intelligence Agency. We talk about it in terms of being pulled down a rabbit hole. How far are you compromised? Was he ever fully recruited by Chinese intelligence and taking money from them and run literally as a spy? I don't know. What is evident is that the man has had an incredibly cozy relationship with the Chinese government, not just the Chinese people, for 30 years, that he says nothing but positive things about a brutal totalitarian regime that essentially imprisons 1 billion people. And you know, he has no criticism, nothing but positive things to say. And the deeper you go into this, the more you see a guy who, at this point, I mean, he thinks the Chinese Communist Party is on the right side of history. We're the bad guys. This is not your uncle from Indiana who's a good old-fashioned Midwestern boy. This is, look, when this guy was named as the vice presidential choice of Kamala Harris to be her running mate, the first people that came out and congratulated her and him were the Democratic Socialists of America, a communist party, pro-Chinese party inside the United States. So I think it's pretty clear what you got.
Yeah, well, that's sobering even to think about that. There's so much here, Sam, that I'd love to go in with you. And look, I'm by no means am I trying to imply, is he a spy? And I appreciate your answer with that. And I'm not trying to insinuate that in any shape, form, or fashion. But there is a degree of concern. There's no question about this relationship, as you describe it, a cozy relationship. Let me ask you this, in your opinion, is he worthy of having the security clearance that would be required as a vice president? Is that concerning at all to you?
No, look, the guy couldn't get a security clearance to work on the loading dock at CIA, right? I mean, first of all, I don't even understand, as a senior enlisted member of the National Guard, I don't understand, quite frankly, how he maintained that security clearance with 30 trips back and forth to communist China. And by the way, guys, I mean, anybody watching this, these were trips on which he took large numbers of Americans and toured around and did all sorts of things on the ground in China. Well, okay, but you don't do that. Like, as a private citizen, you just don't load up 60 Americans and go conduct these these kind of programs on Chinese soil, you have to have the approval and the cooperation of the Chinese government to do that. It's not a free society, obviously. So that's 30 trips that one way or the other he was doing in cooperation with the Chinese government. Look, when the dude was, when he was inaugurated as governor of Minnesota, the Chinese consulate sent a special representative to congratulate him and stand next to him. Okay, well, if you're a critic of China, that doesn't happen and you don't keep going back and forth to China, right? The only way that happens is because you're saying the things they want you to say. If you're bringing Americans to, and literally dozens and dozens of students to China and touring the country, and they're letting you do it, and in some cases it appears actually funding him to do it, well, we understand as a matter of common sense what that means. You are delivering the message the Chinese Communist Party wants you to deliver. If you were showing up and criticizing their totalitarian regime, you'd find you weren't welcomed back, right?
Yeah, good question. And you just brought up, to my knowledge, at least, Walz has never explained where the money came from to finance all these trips.
No.
We've got just a minute left, and then and I appreciate you staying over the break because I've got some more questions for you. But any idea who paid for these trips?
Well, look, as far as I can determine so far, and I always try to be careful and factual and stand on firm ground. His initial trip to China when he taught was done in cooperation with and largely paid for by the Chinese, and at least one of the trips that he did early on also was sponsored by them. I'm in the same place you are. After that, where the money came from for 29 more visits to China remains unclear. But again, he was taking dozens of people. He wasn't paying for this out of his pocket, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, even their wedding, their honeymoon over there, I understand there was a huge, like 60 students or whatever.
Absolutely.
I think I'm
Yes.
close in the ballpark with that.
Yes.
Somebody had to pay for that, all of it. You mentioned a little bit earlier about here's an individual who has said nothing but positive comments about the communist regime. What are some of the specific praises that he has made? If you can kind of take us there into his mind and the type of attitude he has towards the Communist Party of China.
Well, when he came back from spending his initial, he taught in China for a year, circa 1990. When he came back, his response, his commentary was something to the effect of, he would never be treated that well again in his life, no matter where he went, no matter what he did.
Wow.
People that have come out online since who were with him at various points in China describe how he was constantly the guy insisting on other Americans and not criticizing the Chinese regime, not criticizing its oppression of people, apparently buying dozens of copies of Mao's Little Red Book to pass out to people. This has been the tenor of his commentary about China forever. I said before the break that a Chinese consular official attended his inauguration as governor, but Walz has actually appeared at a whole bunch of events inside the United States put on by the Chinese Communist Party. And people should understand that the concept of the United Front and elite capture, the Chinese have a whole of government approach. Every one of their government institutions that operate abroad have the purpose of co-opting people and getting them to do what the Chinese want. And they refer to the concept as elite capture. So anybody of significance in a target country, and obviously we would be target number one, a politician, a corporate leader, anybody a government official, anybody they think has pull, they work overtime to co-opt them through a whole host of entities that all are about Chinese, have the labels like Chinese Friendship Association. It's only one objective, just bend these people to the will of the Chinese. Well, Walz has a long history of cooperating with these associations, appearing at their events, and basically singing the praises of a totalitarian regime. So I get it now. He wants to reinvent himself and say he loves the Chinese people, but he was always fighting communism. Well, I'm sorry, there's 30 years of evidence that says the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, coming into home now as governor of Minnesota, his connections with Global Minnesota, to me, seems to indicate, and tell me if I'm barking up the right tree, but his relationship with Global Minnesota seems to indicate that his view of allowing a hostile foreign government to literally operate within U.S. borders. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So Global Minnesota is this outfit that hosts what the Chinese call, everything's a euphemism. They're Chinese overseas service centers. Well, they're basically police stations for the Chinese state, but police stations in the sense that their job is to hunt down, pressure, in some cases apprehend, and literally drag away to China dissidents. So their purpose around the world is to find the guys who are trying to fight for democracy in China and end that. They do it in a variety of ways. I mean, like I say, some cases they drag them home. In other cases, they just show up with a picture of your grandmother and let you know that grandma, who's still back home, is going to pay the price if you don't shut up. Well, Walz is tied to Global Minnesota, and he's done nothing to shut down that service center that operates in Minnesota.
All right, let me try to wrap this up if I can, Sam, and thank you for this incredible conversation and the information you've brought to the table that everyone needs to be aware of. What kind of information would you like to know about Walz's relationship with Communist China that we don't currently know? What would you like to have brought to the table and questions answered?
Well, to start with what we talked about a little bit ago, I'd like to address the financial issues. You have had this ongoing enterprise for 3 decades, taking, by this point, hundreds and hundreds of Americans to China. Who paid for that? And how about a list of all of your contacts in the Chinese Communist Party by name and affiliation? Because what you're going to find is there are no clear separations amongst agencies with Communist China. What you're going to find is that some of these guys are flat out intelligence officers. They're Chinese spies. I mean, that's what you're going to find. But the kind of disclosure that you ought, if I was applying for a job and trying to get a security clearance and I'd been going back and forth to China for 30 years, I'd be writing dozens and dozens and dozens of pages of full disclosure. Who, what, where, when, why, money. This guy wants to be a heartbeat away from the presidency. He ought to provide the same.
Do you think we'll get that information in the course of the campaign, real quickly?
Not a prayer, right? That's the Kamala Harris campaign is all about not divulging anything and creating a false reality. So no.
Wow. Sam Faddis, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the program, providing us this very thoughtful and concerning discussion. We appreciate it a great deal. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.